There's a moment when the light hits the page of a ruined spire and the ash in the air catches like embers. A solstice stops being a video game and becomes something else entirely. A tragedy you can feel in your bones, a hymn sung for the dead, and a testament to how far one soul will go to redeem another. I remember the first time I crossed the bridge into Elden, the once golden city now swallowed by corruption and sorrow. The wind carried no life, only the echoes of what was lost. It was there in that haunting silence that I understood. Solstice isn't just about fighting monsters, it's about confronting the ghost of your own faith. From the opening frame, Solstice declares itself as a world steeped in divine decay. You play as Briar and Lute, two sisters bound not only by blood, but by a metaphysical tether that defies the laws of nature. Briar's body, reborn through ritual, is half human and half specter. Her form both weapon and wound. Lute, meanwhile, exists as a spectral presence ever beside her, ever watching. Their bond is the game's heartbeat, pulsing beneath every clash of steel and every whisper of despair. A unity forged through tragedy, defiance, and a shared purpose that carries the weight of the entire world's salvation. What struck me immediately was the tone, the texture of the world. There's something almost painterly about it, but painted with ash instead of color. The developers at Reply Game Studios crafted a setting that feels both divine and doomed, a shattered cathedral of light and shadow. The city of Elden, with its fallen statues and crumbling towers, doesn't just tell you it was great once. It makes you feel its fall. Every environment carries a story of faith betrayed and power unchecked. The golden banners of the Chimera Order flutter not with pride, but with guilt, and the architecture itself feels like a monument to hubris, a civilization so certain of its righteousness. And then there's the combat, an almost balletic violence, equal parts elegance and brutality. It's here that Solstice finds its rhythm, a kind of ritual dance between destruction and discipline, the perfect moment when steel and spirit converge. At its core, the combat system is a meditation on duality. Briar represents the corporal, the strength, the anger, the tangible reality of survival, while Lute is the intangible, the voice of reason, empathy, and restraint. Mechanically, this manifests in the dual control system, where Lute's abilities overlay Briar's actions like a guiding hand. You can't just mash your way through enemies, you must sync with her, anticipate her, trust her. And that trust becomes emotional currency as much as gameplay rhythm. You come to rely on her calm reminders in the chaos, her spectral interventions that save you from unseen blows. The game never lets you forget that she's always there. It's a haunting mechanic because it mirrors grief itself. Briar's physicality is fierce, determined, but every moment of triumph is shadowed by Lute's soft sorrow. Their unity is built on loss. Solstice understands that to fight monsters born from corrupted souls, one must carry their own burden of corruption too. That theme runs deep through the veins of the narrative. The ideal that purity is not achieved by denying the darkness, but it's by confronting it, mastering it, and surviving it without losing oneself completely. The atmosphere reinforces this philosophy. The score is almost ecclesial, a choir of lost souls echoing through the ruins. The music never settles into heroism. It mourns even in victory. There's this delicate interplay of strings and voices that gives the entire journey a funeral rhythm. The sound design, too, is impeccable. The clang of steel on stone reverberates like a confession, and the spectral resonance when you activate Lute's field feels like reality itself sighing under the strain of holiness. Even the voice acting carries that weight. The performers inhabit their roles with a kind of wary conviction that makes every line sound like it's been lived rather than written. As I moved deeper into Illidan, I started to notice the narrative architecture revealing itself, not in exposition, but in echoes. Solstice doesn't tell you everything, it lets you piece it together through fragments, symbols, and the lingering emotion of each encounter. The lore of the world unfolds like scripture written on cracked marble. The Holy Kingdom, the Chimera Order, the unseen forces that twist man into monsters. None of it's spoon-fed. And that restraint gives the story a mythical density. It feels ancient, There's something distinctly tragic about it all, as though the world was doomed the moment faith became doctrine and the sacrifice became routine. That's one of the most compelling aspects of Solstice, its theological undercurtain. It asks what happens when holiness becomes weaponized, when the pursuit of purity turns into an act of violence. Briar and Lute, in that sense, are living contradictions, divine instruments born from mortal sin. They are tools of redemption and reminders of failure. The order that made them is both savior and sinner, and through that paradox the game finds its voice. It's a voice that doesn't preach, but mourns, a lament for those who believe too deeply in salvation to recognize the cost. I think that's why the tragedy of the sisters resonates so deeply. Even when you strip away the mechanics and the lore, what remains is a portrait of love under impossible strain. Lute's present is both comfort and a reminder. She is the ghost of what was lost, yet she refuses to fade. Their conversations, their friction, their shared moments of quiet reflection amidst chaos, they all build a picture of humanity fighting to survive. Every upgrade, every triumph, every wound carries emotional consequence. When Briar grows stronger, you feel the cost of that strength. When Lute falters, you sense the fragility of the balance they maintain. Thematically, Solstice sits at a crossroads between duty and identity. Briar is defined by her purpose, but that purpose is one assigned to her by others, by an institution that sees her as a weapon rather than a woman. Lute, meanwhile, represents the voice of consciousness, the last shred of humanity whispering through divine machinery. Together they embody the tension between obedience and autonomy. The more powerful they become, the more you begin to question whether they're fighting for salvation or are simply fulfilling a prophecy written by hands that no longer remember mercy. What makes this journey feel so personal, even amidst the grand scale of divine warfare, is its emotional honesty. Solstice doesn't shy away from melancholy. It embraces it. Every corner of its world feels like it's mourning something, and every encounter feels like a confession. There's beauty in its ruin, and purpose in its despair. You're never really just progressing through levels. You're retracing the steps of civilization that tried to ascend too far. The enemies you face aren't nameless beasts. They're fragments of what was once human, distorted reflections of ambition and guilt. The race, the possessed, the corrupted, they're all mirrors of the same sin, trying to grasp divinity through violence. The combat, for all its fluidity and grace, reinforces this. There's a constant sense of cost in every victory. You're rewarded for aggression, but punished for recklessness. You feel the toll of battle not through damage numbers, but through atmosphere. The air grows heavier, the world darker as you push forward. The longer you fight, the more you begin to realize that this isn't a story of triumph. It's a descent. And that descent feels spiritual. Every arena is a confessional space, every boss a manifestation of some unspoken sin. You're not purging evil as so much as walking through the wreckage of sanctity itself. Graphically, Solstice achieves a kind of mournful beauty. The art direction draws clear inspiration from anime and high fantasy, but it filters that style through a gothic lens. The character designs are sharp, detailed, almost statuesque. Briar's armor glints with both holiness and menace, while Lute's ethereal form drifts like a memory barely holding shape. The world around them, rendered in stark contrast of light and shadow, feels tactile. It's not realism that drives the aesthetic, it's emotion. You can almost smell the dust of the ruins, feel the chill in the wind that carries through broken cathedrals. The color palette, bleached whites, bruised blues, and bleeding red, tells its own story of decay and endurance. The camera work, too, contributes to the cinematic sensibility. Fixed angles invoke a sense of deliberate framing, like panels from a dark graphic novel. They force you to see the world from certain perspectives, reminding you that you're walking through a story already written in tragedy. Yet the dynamic shifts during combat open up the frame, pulling you into the choreograph of violence. It's as if the camera itself breathes with the action static when contemplative, sweeping when furious. That blend of control and chaos mirrors the dual nature of Briar and Lute perfectly. As I journeyed further, I began to notice that Solstice is not simply a story about fighting corruption. It's about resisting inevitability. Everything in Elden feels doomed, yet the sisters press on. That determination becomes almost mythological. They're not heroes in the traditional sense. They're pilgrims walking through a fallen paradise, carrying the last light of a dying world. The further they go, the more their relationship evolves, not through exposition, but through tone. Their dialogue shifts, their silence deepens, and their connection between something sacred, you begin to feel that their unity is the only thing holding reality together. Solstice never loses sight of its humanity. The small moments, the flicker of doubt in Briar's voice, the quiet reassurance in Lute's cut through the spectacle like blades of truth. It's in those moments that the game reveals its emotional thesis, that strength without empathy is hollow, and that sacrifice without understanding is just another form of blindness. The story doesn't glorify suffering, it contextualizes it. Every wound, every loss becomes a part of a greater conversation about what it means to endure in a world that has forgotten grace. As the narrative deepens, you start to see how everything ties back to choice. The choices we make in pain, in faith, in desperation. Solstice doesn't give you branching dialogue trees, it gives you something more profound, moral weight without permission to escape it. The game understands that true choice isn't about options, it's about consequence. You carry the emotional residue of what's happened, even if you couldn't have stopped it. That's where the tragedy lies. It's not in what happens, it's in what was never going to change. In the end, I can say that Solstice is less about victory and more about witness. You walk through a requiem, not a conquest. You learn that salvation in this world isn't a clean act of heroism, but a fragile thread of belief held against impossible odds. Briar and Lute aren't saints, they're survivors of faith itself, and in that they become something transcendent, not because they defeat darkness, but because they refuse to be unmade by it. When I think back on my time in Elden, what lingers isn't the spectacle of combat or the scale of the world. It's the quiet after battle, the sound of Lute's voice drifting through the silence, the way the light catches on Briar's blade as if mourning what it must cut. Solstice is a tragedy disguised as an action game, a meditation on what it means to carry love through ruin, and that's why, when the credits finally roll, you don't feel triumphant, you feel changed. Not because you won, but because you endured. Solstice isn't here to tell you how to save the world. It's here to remind you that even in its ashes, there's something worth saving.